do your thing.
If you need to take a break.
I just water and I can last 5-10 minutes. Just let me get some water.
Can I ask a question though?
Sure.
Megan? Now, the signs on the doors that say no food or drink, that's just for the citizens, or is that for the county workers also? That doesn't apply to you?
Sure.
Okay.
Probably for the county commission.
Okay.
What happened? My back's hurting too, so if you don't mind if I stand.
I don't mind.
That was another thing at that day, is that he kept telling me to sit down when my back was hurting. And claiming it was the law that I couldn't stand.
I don't think you ever, oh, that day you mean?
Yeah.
But you meant our last hearing?
No, that day, the
I was
second.
gonna say, I don't think I ever would have made you sit if you told me your parents.
No, I know.
If I could just make some closing argument. So, we were here back in August in a very similar case. Mr. Felix, he says he's not challenging the constitutionality of their policy, but it is one of the main cruxes of his argument is that their policy is an infringement on his right to free press and his right to free speech. When we were here, and I believe it was in August, before you made any rulings, you made some findings. You don't have the ability to determine the constitutionality of their policy. The purpose of the appeal is to determine if the trespass was properly issued pursuant to the county code, and those are the only issues at hand, and any challenge to the policy needs to be done through the court system. So he's been told this, but I would ask that you make those same findings, and because of that...
Objection. I wasn't violating a policy.
Right. So,
Because I know from the last hearing that I wasn't allowed to record inside the lobby, so I didn't record.
But he's saying that he's wanting me to find that I still have the limited authority to decide whether you did or didn't violate the policy, not the constitutionality of the policy.
Right. You have the authority to
That's
rule
all-
on whether I
that's-
violated the policy of recording in the lobby.
That's what he's asking, is that I find that that is where my...
Oh, okay, where your jurisdiction is?
stops
Okay.
for purposes of this.
Okay.
So we're here under 66-159, appeals are governed under sub 6. Sub 6, sub K states, the government bears the burden of proof by a preponderance of the evidence that the trespass warning was properly issued pursuant to the criteria of this section. So it is a relatively low burden. It's not the criminal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. Frankly, if the standard was beyond a reasonable doubt, I don't know that we'd be here. But it's preponderance of the evidence. It simply means more likely than not. It's the 51% rule. And a copy of the trespass warning was introduced into evidence through Corporal Zalva. The trespass warning itself shows that it meets the requirements for issuance. Only authorized personnel may make an initial determination to issue a trespass warning. That's the first requirement. The ordinance defines authorized personnel as an employee with management or oversight responsibility and as security personnel. So in this instance, there was testimony that Ms. Amy Polk, the office manager, who has that management or oversight responsibility, as well as Jeff Gentry, who is security personnel, they both authorize the trespass. Section 2A states that they may authorize the trespass if they determine that the person has acted in any manner which violates any rule, policy, or directive on any sign at the public property, if they determine. So it's not Corporal Zalva's job, it's not the Sheriff's Office's job to make the determination. If they determine their policy is violated, they can initiate the trespass. So in this instance, authorized personnel determined that he violated their video recording policy. We know the policy is posted at the property. There's photos and evidence of that. It's posted on the front door when you come in, as well as on the wall right when you come in. So the ultimate issue really is, have we proven by a preponderance of the evidence that he violated that posted policy? And there's been a lot of argument in reference to the supplemental order of the special magistrate from the last hearing. I'd submit that it's almost entirely irrelevant. First of all, you don't need a special order to go do a public records request, whether you've been trespassed from another location or not. That order was in response to a request to re-enter the Land O'Lakes location. That request was denied, and in the order, I would almost argue it's dicta that one of the reasons it's denied is because there's 4 other locations you can go to if you have legitimate business, but certainly doesn't need that order to go to the other locations. And what that order certainly is not blanket authority to then go violate their posted policy.
Objection. I never violated the
He's
policy.
just making an argument.
Okay.
To the extent
I will
that,
say that I wrote the order, and part of the reason is that I didn't want him to not be able to go back and exercise his other First Amendment rights, such as protests on the sidewalk or
Take notes inside the building.
right. Well, that particular location you were trespassing from, but you could go stand on the sidewalk outside of it with a sign.
But the Wesley Chapel location, I can go in there with a clipboard and write down what's going on as a journalist.
I don't think anybody's arguing that. They're arguing whether or not you reported or not.
And they flip-flopped over and over again.
I mean, he's made argument that the order authorizes him to exercise his First Amendment, i.e. record at the other policies. So to the extent he's arguing that today,
Is that your argument?
No.
Because I think you're taking a little bit of a lead there.
Yeah. I knew that I wasn't allowed to record. You told me through paperwork, that court order, that I'm not allowed to record and I can't violate their policy. So I made sure I wasn't violating their policy. And they still came after me, attacked me, and forced me out on their threatened arrest. Huh? Yeah, immediately. I couldn't even get a chance to have a de-escalated conversation with a professional. I had that hothead. That guy doesn't belong in there.
sorry, go ahead, Council. So just, I'm looking at what evidence we do have. We do know that this is a man who, to some extent, kind of has a reputation for recording.
Objection. All journalists have, that's what all journalists do. That's irrelevant.
Record.
Journalists record. They take records, either through video, audio, written records, and they create a journal and they publish it. How is that relevant? Whether they have a reputation. If CNN walked in there, they wouldn't act that way. I guarantee Jeff wouldn't go up and accost them and tell them to leave and threaten them with arrest over and over again. They would get special treatment because they're mainstream media. They just don't like independent journalists. And as you saw the employees say, it's okay to record inside.
Yeah, I heard that, but I'll put what way I think.
The point I'm making is it's a guy who has a history of recording in their other offices, shows up.
Objection. I recorded in one office.
Okay, but I think
He just made it plural like that. I'm going to all the offices. I've only been in 2.
So a guy who's known to have recorded in one of their offices walks into this office wearing a body camera. It's not unreasonable for them to initiate an investigation as to whether he's recording. Then they go up and they see a flashing red light, which is very consistent with recording.
Objection.
why? What is your?
There's 8 million models of camera. Oh, that's what I forgot to ask Delta. Their cameras don't blink when they record either. So
Right.
that argument is null and void and invalid.
How is that null and void and valid?
Because the Pasco County Sheriff's body cams do not blink when they're recording. There's no way for you to know.
That's a negative. Like you're using the opposite thing that happened to make an argument.
What I'm saying is a blinking light.
You testified to. You don't know if it will record without a link.
Correct. I would have to research the whole thing,
Right.
and there's no way anybody else could know unless they know the model specifically, have personal first-hand knowledge. And the body cameras the police use do not blink, and they still record.
Right. But yours was blinking, and you testified that you never recorded where it didn't, where it blinked without it recording.
I said, I don't know if I said I don't recall if I have. It doesn't matter, you can set it up any way you want. The fact that the light's blinking is invalid, it means nothing.
Okay, well, I think that's just where he was getting at with,
It's an invalid point.
I mean,
okay.
if he's gonna object every other sentence, I don't really care.
Just false statements, that's it.
Care to continue. He obviously has a right to respond to a rebuttal argument after.
Yeah.
We'll be here forever.
I tend to agree. Let him make his argument.
Well, if he's making false statements.
Then you can tell me.
Okay, I'll take notes when he makes false statements.
That'd be great.
All right.
Show him out.
You know, part of his case today was that he was there to do a public records request, but then we have indication through the testimony that he didn't even check in when he got there. He didn't get a ticket. He just sat there wearing the body camera. So even though he argues that he wasn't recording, the evidence, especially in light of a preponderance of the evidence standard, tends to suggest that he was. Going back to the blinking red light that we were talking about, you know, he's indicated that it doesn't mean anything. It's a setting that can be turned off. But we have to exercise our common sense too. I mean, from our experience with cameras, with everyone's life experience and common sense, generally speaking, a blinking red light does mean recording. Both Mr. Gentry testified to that, and that from his experience of what it means. Ms. Moore testified that she's been testing a very similar model, and that when it's recording, it blinks reds. So, you know, he said you can change it, but what we haven't seen today, what we haven't heard any testimony about, what we haven't seen one example of, is where the body camera is not recording, but it's not recording, but the light is blinking red. So, you know, Ms. Moore testified that she's been testing these body cameras, and she's compared it to the one, and she's not able to replicate that. From her experience, blinking red light means recording. So, it's my contention that Pasco County has proven by preponderance of the evidence that he did violate that video recording policy. And, you know, there's been argument about, well, the employees are recording, or the sheriffs are recording, some reference to 10 other people recording that day. You know, they're, as we talked about at the time, they're acting within the scope of their employment. There's no risk of exposing information. So looking back to the ordinance, some of the factors that they can consider when making the decision to request a trespass warning. And did the person refuse to conform to any verbal request or warnings to desist or cease the violation? So Mr. Gentry testified that that happened in this case. Previous violations they can consider. We know there's the prior Land O'Lakes case. And the harm or potential harm. It doesn't have to be actual harm to the public, but potential harm to the public. So there was a lot of testimony about that as well. And that's what this whole policy is about, is that video recording in their office constitutes a harm to the public. Ms. Moore testified that they're dealing with sensitive information, driver's license, social security, and they have an affirmative duty under the law to protect that information. So he argues that that doesn't apply to him, that regulation, and it doesn't. It applies to them. It is on them. So they have to take proactive steps to ensure that the law is complied with and the public's not harmed. And that's what they've done through a no video recording policy. That's why they require customers to sit down until they're called. It's why the driver's test log that was admitted into evidence has been redacted, because they have to protect that information. They have to take affirmative steps, and they've done exactly that. So if someone comes in and looks like they're video recording, that constitutes potential harm to the public. Mr. Zamora testified how they had to shut down operations that day for an hour. Going to the content of the trespass warning itself that Corporal Zalva issued, it has to state the facts and circumstances justifying the trespass. This one that's in evidence does. It has to specify which policy has been violated. This one that's in evidence does. It must identify the scope of its prohibition by address. It says on there the address of Wesley Chapel tax collector. And it can only be issued by law enforcement after receiving a written statement containing the basis for the trespass. So again, Corporal Zalva testified to collecting those written statements on February 8th. Specifically, the written statement of Jeffrey Gentry has been introduced into evidence. And Corporal Zalva also on cross-examination testified that he forwarded a copy to the county attorney on the day of. So we've proven that the trespass was properly issued pursuant to 66-159. I don't want to get too much into the constitutionality argument. It kind of came out on his cross-examination. This is a quasi-judicial body. It's not a judicial body. There's limited authority to determine if the trespass was properly issued. The judicial function, that's power of the courts. There's plenty of case law on that. Just real briefly, can't be Board of Public Instruction of Alachua County. The site's 278 Southern 2nd, 260. It's a Florida Supreme Court Act 1973. They said, as a general rule, administrative agencies have no general judicial powers, notwithstanding they may perform some quasi-judicial duties, and the legislature may not authorize officers or bodies to exercise powers which are judicial in their nature. But there's no universe in which you, the hearing officer, could say, well, their policy is unconstitutional, so, therefore, the whole thing's quashed. He's got to take it to the courts. He's been told that. We talked about last time the Sheets versus Punta Gorda. I don't want to waste a lot of time on that because I don't think it's pertinent to this tribunal. But the argument, it was a video recording City Hall ordinance. The argument is that it's a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction on a limited public forum. The test that was established in that case is reasonable and viewpoint neutral, which I think if they were sued, they would pass that test. Unlike a policy like no black people, which, not even really a restriction on speech, it would really be an equal protection civil rights violation. But, if a policy like that were enacted, I would sure hope that somebody would challenge them and bring them to court before there was any enforcement of it, and not try to argue it in a quasi-judicial administrative hearing. So, the issue here is not the legal merits of their policy. It's did we prove by preponderance of the evidence that he violated their policy and that the trespass warning was issued according to 66-159. I would submit that it was. That's all I got.
So,
Still the camera?
yeah.
You want to see it again?
Sure. Can I tell you now, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
He's saying that I was told to cease and desist with a violation. How can I cease and desist something I wasn't doing? Okay? I had your court order with me. I was in there for legitimate business. I was peaceful, I was quiet. I got accosted by a guy wearing a gun. He started barking at me. Let me get a word. I know I wasn't allowed to record inside the lobby, and that's why I didn't record inside the lobby. What else did he say? As far as needing, I didn't need a ticket when I first went in there. I first went in there to sit down and take some notes on my clipboard, as this lady testified. And then, when I went up to the gatekeeper to make my public records request, if they wanted me to take a ticket, I would have gladly taken a ticket. Instead, she went back and Mr. Gentry came out, accosted me, and wouldn't let me get a word in edgewise and kept threatening me over and over and over. Claiming he gave me trespass paperwork, which he never handed me. And then the other gentleman and claimed that I never left the property, and then he contradicted himself over and over and over again. So I was trespassed for not recording. It's as simple as that. I literally went in there for a quick transaction. I showed them your thing. I wasn't violating their policy. They had no reason to trespass me. They just are targeting me because they don't like independent journalists. That's it. It's as plain as day.
So, was the flashing when you were in there?
I'm not sure. That's what they're claiming.
You don't know?
I was not recording in there. Regardless of what lights were flashing, I made sure I didn't record in there because I know I'm not allowed to record in there.
Okay, well, what I'm asking is, do you know
I don't.
the light was flashing?
I don't.
Okay. Did you do anything to manipulate it since then to make it not flash?
No.
You said you had to hook it to the computer or something? You didn't do that?
If you wanted to change the settings,
Right.
I don't know if you have to do it by the computer, but it comes with a little cable you plug into your computer, and you have a big screen to look at, and you could change the settings.
Since that date?
No.
To change the settings of the flash?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you have any questions based on my questions?
No.
All right, I'm gonna take your statement and all the other evidence that was administered and review it.
Okay.
At least provide a written order, hopefully by the end of this week.
Okay.
All right.
Done?
Yep,
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
thanks.
Which way goes to the front of the building?
Hmm?
This way go to the front?
Which side is it?
Where the water fountain? Where the water fountain is?
This is the side. Neither one of these comes up. Both of them come out of the side. And then you have to walk to the middle to go out that door. See the sign on the door? No food or drink?
Yeah.
I asked Margaret if I could ask him a question, and I asked him,